Hey, Jonathan Peters here. I'm the creator of This Ain't Your Grandma's Grammar. I wanted to put together a quick little video for you today to show you how This Ain't Your Grandma's Grammar is different than any other type of grammar training out there. And it really comes down to just two main areas. The first is multiple delivery methods, and the second is gamification. So let's look at the first. Online training is great. It's inexpensive. It makes learning very, very accessible. Sometimes it speeds up the process, but there's a lot of issues when it comes to online training. Now, I've been around online training for some time. Back in 2003, I began teaching online at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, teaching business writing to senior business majors. And I can tell you from experience that as an instructor, I do things very differently online than when I'm in the classroom. And the main area is just without the personal contact, I don't have a feel for who's in my class, who the students are, what their issues are, what their questions are. And if I were to be really honest, when I'm teaching online, they're pretty much just numbers, names and numbers. I really don't interact and engage with them. So there's real issues when it comes to just straight online training. But on the other side of the equation, live training, we have a lot of information to cover in a relatively short period of time. And what we're asking students to do is to remember, not only just take stuff in, but to also remember over a long, protracted period of time. So a one-to-one training is better when it comes to, let's say, a full day of grammar. That's a lot of information that must come into the brain and then stick in the brain over a length of time. So what if we combined the two? What if we had an online portion and then an offline portion? And that's exactly what we do with This Ain't Your Grandma's Grammar. We start with a half-day live training. Then we move it to online training for 5 weeks afterward. Now, part of the reason why we do that is so that over time, participants get to test their knowledge, they get to learn in small increments, and they get to actually apply it to the workplace. So let's talk about that first half-day live training. We begin bringing everybody together and look at proofreading. Now, this is really important. Throughout the training, we want to have everybody feel comfortable asking questions and learning. Too often we have embarrassment when it comes to grammar. We've been maybe gotten some bad messages when we were in school. Maybe we didn't get the A. Maybe there was a teacher, some grammar Nazi or something, someone really pushing some negative information on us. So we want people to feel comfortable. So when we begin with why we have typos on the page, and the main message is this: the reason you have typos on the page is because you are too smart. Right? Our brains process information very, very quickly, very, very efficiently, and that's why we have typos on the page. So once we begin with the premise that the reason we have errors is because we are too smart, now we can move to strategies for proofreading that will actually work with our brains the way our brains are designed. Okay? So yes, we're talking about proofreading. Yes, we're talking about proofreading skills, and the overriding message is we're too smart, because we want folks to enter into this training with self-confidence. So after we've established, here's our brains, we're too smart, here's why we have typos on the page, then we move into the actual training, and this is where the gamification begins. I don't know about you, but grammar can be a relatively dry topic. There's a lot of rules to cover. It's not very exciting or fun or interesting unless you're really into that kind of thing. And so how do we make this interesting for the participants? How do we encourage engagement? And more importantly, how do we create a learning environment that actually sticks? So we begin with this story. The story is this: Grandma loves grammar. She loves grammar. And she also bakes cookies. So one of the things that Grandma does is that when we get something right in grammar, she gives us a cookie. So throughout the training, participants will be collecting cookies. So you get a question right, you get a cookie. You ask a question, you get a cookie. There's certain challenges, you get a cookie. And so we keep collecting cookies. Now, this is another important part to understand. The reason we begin this in the half-day training is because we create teams. We form teams, and we keep those teams throughout the training. And the reason for this is several-fold, but when it comes to gamification, we have more engagement when we work with a team. We have responsibility to the team instead of just giving up or not worrying about taking a lesson or learning. Now when we have team responsibility, we're more likely to follow through. But also so that people don't feel put on the spot. Okay? So that later when we get to leaderboards, if we had, okay, whose scores are higher, who has the most grandma points, well, then there's going to be those people who are really good and those people who haven't had a lot of experience, and the likelihood is to just give up. But when you work as a team, nobody outside the team really knows what our scores are. Okay, so the team approach is very, very important here. So we form that live in the live training. They give a name to their team because they're going to be on a leaderboard later. So they're going to give that team a name. Again, identifying, creating identity with the group. And then we begin actual training. Okay, so there'll be some questions. We actually start with punctuation. It's the easiest, it's the least embarrassing. There's some fun things with punctuation and so on. So we go to a table, they get a question. After we've taught them a little something, they get a question. If they get it right, they get grandma points, they get grandma cookies, and so on. So throughout the live session, we establish this, and we do have winners live. Okay? Then we move to the online training. Okay, but before we get there, we have one other aspect of this gamification to mention, and that's there are also boss points. Okay, so we have grandma cookies and boss points. See, grammar has changed a little bit since Grandma was around. Grandma's one of those old ladies. She had this thing called a typewriter. And so back then we did things differently than we do today. So wherever there's a transition in language, in this case business language, there are boss points. Now here's the thing, when we get a boss point, we've offended Grandma and we've hurt her feelings, and so we lose some cookies. But a boss point yields $1 extra hour. So $1 raise an hour, which is a little over $2,000 a year. So that's a pretty big deal. And so the participants get to look back and forth and make these decisions. Do we go along with Grandma, say, and still put 2 spaces after a period? Or do we go with the boss points and only put 1 space after a period? And so throughout the training, the participants get to several opportunities for this. And we've also built in some chance cards if one team starts succeeding way more than the others to keep the field competitive. So there's lots of gamification elements that we don't necessarily need to cover right here today. There's badges for the different levels. I mentioned leaderboard and so on. So there's lots of different gamification applications inside this training to keep them engaged, keep them involved as they progress through the training. So at the end of the half day, the participants understand why there's typos on the page. They have a strategy for moving forward, and they have some real knowledge, some things they can apply today to grammar, in this case punctuation. So it's live, it's easy, and right away they can begin working on things. But we want to continue the learning. We want to continue the learning, and that's where we move it online, so that they can learn in modules, small little chunks. Most of the videos are less than 10 minutes long. The lessons are longer, but they're broken into 10-minute sessions. At the end of each session, they have a quick little quiz where they can get some more grammar points. Also, at the end of each module, there's an overview quiz that not only goes over what they've learned, but what they learned in the past. So, for instance, when they get started, the first session has to do with just some basics on sentence structure, just to make sure everyone's on the same page. Then let's say we move to pronouns. Well, by the time you get to the end of the pronoun session, you'll take a reminder, and that goes all the way through the pronouns, sentence structure, back to punctuation, which they learned at the live session. And so each week, not only do they have a module of learning new things about grammar, then we also keep moving forward and backward at the same time. So we're continually testing. And the leaderboard keeps going up or down depending on which team's getting the cookies, which team has exchanged those cookies for boss points, and so on. So we have this dynamic that continues over 5 weeks, again, continually reinforcing the learning. So by doing this, we get the best of both worlds. We get some live training so I can understand what the level is, where the questions are, where the weaknesses are, what issues are likely to come up. And then we move it to online, and then we can continue the training in a more applicable way, in a way that not only is fun, it creates engagement, creates a competition, but also sticks, right? So they actually learn while at work, while they apply things and take tests and quizzes and so on, the usual stuff. And like I said, it's fun, it's engaging. We got lots of little badges along the way, little celebrations along the way to help them out. Oh yeah, and there's that part where the managers or supervisors can also see how things are going. Because by being online, now we have a method for seeing what is engagement, who's watching the videos, who's taking the quizzes, where we're stumbling. Maybe they're not at 100% and getting all the grammar points. And so we're able to look at this as supervisors, managers, and leaders are able to see how their team is doing. So we also have that element brought in as well. So you want to talk about getting bang for the buck. In this training, this Ain't Your Grandma's Grammar, we have the best of all worlds. We have live training, we have online training. We have games, we have gamification so that people are engaged. They learn over time and they're tested on their ability to learn, and they're able to apply it at work. And best of all, they're enjoying the process. They're having fun while learning. They're having fun while keeping that information and retaining that information over time. And what could be better than that? So I want to encourage you to take a look around, see some of the demos, some of the samples, and reach out to us and let us know how we can help you develop the language skills of your team.